Before we get into the topic, I think it's important to talk about what is a commodity versus what is a differentiated product. And according to Investopedia, this slide, commodity is a basic good used in commerce that is interchangeable with other goods of the same type. So it really doesn't matter what you're using. It's all interchangeable. Wheat, corn, things like that. What scares me, sort of on a side note, what scares me today is that we've known for a while that radiology has been commoditized. That's why we've seen a lot of private equity groups come into the radiology market, and not for the good of our specialty, but we still have pockets where it's not as commoditized. What kind of scares me these days is we're seeing this commoditization in a lot of other specialties as well, which I think we'd all agree. Which you would think it would never happen to a procedural specialty like surgery, but I think it's sort of creeping in that area as well. And I think the message that we all get whenever we attend these meetings is you see the physicians in this room and all these other meetings, and they're not all the same. And I think we need to sort of take a stand to make sure we are not continued to be commoditized. All right, so diagnostics. Dave talked about the various ones that are FDA approved. Pylarify, Posluma, Locomets, Illuccix. They all sort of have their own different chemistry, their own radio biodistribution, half-lives, whatnot. I think today, if you were to ask anyone, they would all say, all right, they're all kind of interchangeable. We could say that the PSMA 11, the gallium-68 PSMA 11, some people say the image quality may be not as good as the F-18 based, which, I would agree. I think the image quality is probably a little bit less, not as good, but what does that mean? Does it really matter? And honestly, I don't think it really matters. Posluma, I think for sure there's less GU excretion with Posluma, which theoretically has a lot of benefits. I'm hoping that we can prove and show what type of benefits that has with regards to detection and also with regards to outcomes. But then it's also important to think about other tools out there, right? So from my perspective, when we go and we open up one of these scans, we use more advanced image processing tools. So we use a software called MIM. They have a tool that is called, it's a masking tool. I could put a little dot on the bladder and then it subtracts the bladder out of the image. What impact does that have on our ability to interpret these images? I don't know. But these are all questions that I think we need to explore rather than sort of, getting into minutia, which theoretically might be good or might not be as good. So where are we today? I think it's amazing that we're sitting here today and, Dave shows that map pretty much anywhere in the world, or anywhere in the U.S., not the world, anywhere in the U.S., you can get a PSMA PET if you need one, besides sort of those Montana, North Dakota, which they don't really count. Sorry if you're there. I think Steve Gall, your son, lives in Montana, right, or is studying there? Sorry about that. But it's widely available. And if you step back a few years at this meeting or other of Dave's meetings, we were worried about access. But kudos to Telix, to Lantheus, to Blue Earth, all these, and Novartis, for making access a non-issue with regards to this in a relatively short period of time. And we're seeing really, really high utilization rates, which is good and also bad. I think if you talk to a lot of physicians, especially at the referral centers, I think there's a lot of examples of overutilization, perhaps overtreatment, or maybe doing things that we don't know for sure actually benefit the patient. And that's just kind of a natural thing that happens when you introduce new disruptive technologies. And it's something that I think we need to recognize and learn from. So there's opportunities there as well. The other big issue today is there's variable quality. And I think that quality piece, I think you could divide in two sort of buckets. One bucket is it the radiopharmaceutical or is it the professional side? And in my opinion, and I guess my opinion counts because I'm at the podium, is that the radiopharmaceutical piece probably doesn't matter today. Unless we find ways to really show it makes a difference. But today I don't think we can make that argument. I think on the professional side, absolutely. And I think it's wonderful that all the companies have developed these educational programs to show how to use their products best and also how best to interpret, the imaging results from the use of their various products. And I think that does make a difference. But the problem is, because radiology has been so commoditized, we're not seeing as much time and investment in that. And also, a lot of these referrals are going to perhaps outpatient imaging centers or whatnot, where it's really a throughput game, a volume game, not a quality game. And that's where I think the message also needs to be, all right, if you are making a conscious decision to send your patient to get this imaging test, you are going to act on those findings. So you want to get the best quality test and results. And that only happens if you actually know who's interpreting that study, right? If you're a urologist and you need a radiation oncologist to treat your patient, or you need a med onc for perhaps chemo, I would think you're not sending it to anyone randomly, right? You're sending it to someone who you've built a relationship with. Ideally, you have their contact information. You could pick up on the phone and say, hey, Dan, what do you think about this patient? How can I help? What do you need? That bidirectional communication is invaluable. In fact, it's absolutely a requirement. And also, it builds this feedback loop of learning for all parties. And this is where I don't think we've really done a good job, in part because from an industry perspective, I imagine, I think I'm right in this, you need to sell. You need to get your product out there. And limiting the access, probably decreases the amount you could sell as well. So I think that's an area I think we have the potential to improve as well. Considerations in the diagnostic setting, performance trials are all important. In the end, I think for the time being, a lot of it's just familiarity and comfort. One group started with one product. They've been using it for three years or whatnot. They're just resistant to change. And nuclear medicine docs and radiologists, we're no different from anyone else. We don't like change either. But we will change if pricing is different, right? To Dave's point, if rebates and other things sort of drive the financial incentives to shift, it's probably a reality that we're dealing with. Oftentimes I get emails from our own administrators saying, oh, what about this? And yeah, you have to consider it if it actually makes a financial impact. I think we all need to remember, especially in the hospital setting, the operating margins for a hospital are really, really slim. Post-COVID, they went negative for a lot of organizations. You read about all those layoffs. It's real, and any dollar that we can save makes a huge difference. All right, so shifting to therapeutics, Pluvicto is FDA approved. I included the PSMA-I&T, the lutetium compound here. Not that it's FDA approved, but I think hopefully maybe it gets close, but at least we'll have a decision soon. And I think this is a little bit of a different bucket. It's really going to depend on the data and the results. It's a drug, right? So we're going to treat it just the way we do any chemotherapy, any oral drug or whatnot. And we could always look at the data in various different lenses to, support what you want to do. But again, it's going to come down to the data. Logistics and availability are also a big issue, and we'll see. Obviously, we've all went through the availability issues with Novartis and the Pluvicto product, but kudos to them. They've corrected it, and now, I don't think there are any of those supply chain issues, but who knows what happens in the future. And pricing, obviously, will play a role as well. So this is where I want to spend the last couple minutes. We hear a lot about dosimetry. My opinion, dosimetry is not really going to make it into the mainstream. I host this conference through the SNMI every year, and we do a lot of focus on dosimetry. It is so complicated. We don't know what the results are. I think in the end, what's going to happen is you'll have some centers that focus on dosimetry for very specific scenarios. And we do this for thyroid cancer with I-131. I don't really think the quality piece is there. It's good to really focus around patient safety. Maybe in certain patients that you're redosing or whatnot, you just want to make sure you can give them the maximum tolerable dose to a certain patient just to make sure we minimize the adverse events. Copper-64, that's something that you're hearing a lot about. Clarity has a product, and they had that COBRA trial. They're opening up a Clarify trial, a phase 3. So far from that phase 1-2 trial, it's interesting to see that there's higher detectability, especially with next-day imaging. So this idea of next-day imaging is going to sort of reinvent itself within the nuclear medicine community, and a lot of people are going to say, oh, that's logistically not good. I actually disagree. There's actually logistical ways in actually it could improve our efficiency, improve our throughput as a imaging practice in the long term. It's not meant for everyone, but I think there are ways that it's actually good for patients as well. And if it's actually better performing, it actually provides even more reasons to do this type of next day imaging with a copper 64 compound. Availability is always going to be an issue as well. So last, we have new radiopharmaceuticals, actinium, lead, terbium. You read a lot about it. I think it's exciting. It brings up the questions of supply chain and logistics for all these new isotopes. There's a lot of different companies out there really focusing on how you supply the isotope. I still think we need to focus on the actual small molecule as well, because that is important. This idea of sequencing, a lot of these trials are going to focus on using actinium or whatnot, these alpha particles after lutetium, which makes sense for trial design and development. But if you're using the same molecule and you're just changing the isotope, eventually it makes sense to go after it with a bigger dose, something that hits the cancer cells harder, just as long as you can manage the adverse events reasonably. So I think there's a lot more to come there. But again, supply chain issues are going to be something that we need to focus on. So that's it, and I'll yield my time back to Rob.